Welcome back to Born to Scale. Joining us today is a performance-driven executive who has spent over 20 years scaling global revenue and leading multi-layered sales organizations. Many may know him from his leadership at Google, where he managed portfolios exceeding 700 million in ARR and was recognized as a 3-time sales leader of the year. He has since taken that enterprise-level experience and founded Fractional Leadership Hub, where he serves as a fractional CXO, helping SMBs, BPOs, and SaaS companies navigate hypergrowth operational transitions. That was a lot of business jargon. Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm great, Meg. How are you?
For a more simplified introduction, Brian and I know each other from my Google rep days. He was this super charismatic leader that everybody loved. I've had this burning question about you for many years. Why did everybody love you so much? People's eyes lit up, and you were this leader that people were not afraid of. And when they saw you, they just wanted to say hi and come talk to you. I know that when I saw you, I just couldn't wait to tell you about my latest achievements. It was just so nice to be around you. How did you do that?
I just tried to be myself, to be honest with you, right? It's, being part of a good leader is listening. And I love listening to everybody's success stories, right? Everybody we hired was intelligent, did a great job. And you know what? They had things to share. And I was even open to, listening to new ideas as well. And we implemented some of those ideas, which probably led to more people coming to me as well. And I have a simple mantra in life too, right? Just be nice. There's no reason not to be nice, right? So I loved working there, and I loved all the 300 plus people we had in that office. And it was a great time.
I remember you recommended a great book to me because I was interested in becoming a manager. And you told me, buy this book titled 1 Minute Manager. That was a life-changing book.
Oh, that's awfully kind of you. Look, when I was starting in leadership way back when, we won't say what year, but that was my first book as well, right? And it's be direct and make sure everybody understands what it is they're supposed to do and the expectations are laid out properly, and things tend to work out.
Welcome to my show. This show is about entrepreneurship and growing businesses in so many different ways. I love that you and I are now partners in crime and business. I help businesses with visibility, and you help them with operations, growth, and revenue. I know we work together at the Google program, managing large Fortune 500 portfolios. What was your aha moment that led you to transition out of enterprise leadership and launch Fractional Leadership Hub?
Well, back in 2024, actually, I left the enterprise level corporate life and did some consulting. During that consulting, actually, was a lot of offering suggestions and strategies and things of that nature, right? What I missed, though, was really the getting my hands dirty and executing on those strategies. What I did was I moved from the consultant group to the fractional leader side. Right. And that's really the piece that I love. And it's helping the SMB customers, right? Enterprise folks have so many resources. They've got anywhere, different departments they can look to and get some help with, right? With these SMBs, they have the same issues as enterprise level companies, but they just don't have the help they necessarily need. And I can come in, help them with that. I have a great supporting cast of folks I can reach out to as well, like yourself, right? If I need the additional resources. And, we go in and make sure that we execute the strategies that founder wants and really help them grow their business.
People often conflate fractional leadership with consulting. You're not consulting. How do you define the distinction in your work?
So I think of consultants as somebody that comes in, assesses the business, puts together a strategy, and says, here, founder, go execute it, please. There's really no skin in the game for the consultant at that point, right? I would rather be held accountable. And so fractional leadership, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go in and assess their business. I'm going to put together a strategy with them, and I'm going to execute it for them. And that's how I differentiate the two pieces. And that's how most people do as well.
Right. So a consultant tells you what to do,
Yes.
But a fractional leader, someone like you, actually comes in and runs it with you.
Correct.
Right?
There'll be times where that business may have a small team that they just need a leader, And therefore, I'll come in and manage that group of individuals, right? I'll be on their tools, and then we get that done, right, over the next couple of months or however long it takes. And then I work myself to where I can transition out of that role as well. The purpose of a fractional leader is not to be there forever, right? It's to come in, help the business, make that transition seamless, and then exit gracefully, right? While that business continues to then mature and grow their revenue.
Why fractional? Why not full-time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't yet found that full-time job that interests me as much as some of the things you and I used to do. I live in a small town in Missouri, and I also haven't found anybody here that is looking to grow their business like I would want it to grow, right? A lot of folks here in this town, I've done some consulting work with them. Yeah, they're not interested in, growing at the 20-25% rate you and I used to, right? That just doesn't create a lot of enjoyment for me. So I'd much rather, go in, work hard, and reap some of the rewards of growing those teams and those businesses at a high performing level.
Right. You're not in this for a 9 to 5. You're in this for the trophy.
No. Yes. Yeah. It's a lot more fun that way, right?
I completely agree. At what point should a founder or CEO recognize the need for a leader like you, for a fractional leader, versus investing in additional management layers?
So there's 3 stages in a business that I prefer to work with, right? One's hyper growth, they're booming like gangbusters. Another one's transition. Maybe there's been an acquisition in place. But my favorite, and the one that really answers your question, is when the business is plateaued, right? So they've been in business for a while. They've stopped growing their revenue. There's different things during our assessment with you that we'll locate and find, right? Usually it's the founder, he or she, that is kind of the block between a lot of these things. They're still trying to be the salesperson. They're still trying to be the marketing person. They're still trying to do everything themselves, right? Even with companies that are, 50 to 100 people, my job is to come in, relieve them of some of that so that they become the strategist again, and they can look and see how they want to move their company forward. And then I come in and help them remove some of those blocks, put some KPI governance in place, right? Different things like that, make sure they're operationally sound, improve efficiencies. That's what I do.
The revenue is there, but it's not consistent and it's not predictable. Is that when you come in?
Correct. It's not predictable. And in some points, it just isn't happening anymore, right? And some of these companies not only plateaued, but they've started to regress in some of their year-over-year revenue. There was somebody, a company that had some talent, right? But they just didn't have the right talent, perhaps in the right job role. And sometimes it's as easy as that, right? I know when you and I were working together, right, there were individuals that built campaigns. There were individuals that, worked with other companies to optimize those campaigns, right? Because they were 2 different roles we had it set up as. And sometimes you have somebody speaking to customers that probably maybe shouldn't, and they'd be a much better builder than they were in the optimizing piece, right? So
you can't do everything, right? This is about delegation.
It is, and it's getting the right people. And we used to say it all the time, put the right person on the right seat in the bus, right?
I know you work with SMBs typically, or enterprise level businesses. What's the smallest team you've worked with so far? So is there a minimum number of employees that a business needs to have before you come in the picture, or is there not? What's the smallest team that you worked with?
Sure. The smallest group right now has been 15 individuals. I try to, when I'm out looking for these companies, I try to target 50 to 500. But the one that had the 15, they had some lofty goals and targets. And so I like that challenge, right? And they had some things in place as well. They weren't as operationally strong as I would have liked to have seen, which is where we helped them repair some things. But yeah, it varies, right? It can vary. But 50 to 500 is really kind of what I'm looking for.
Is there a revenue minimum?
This one group was 5 million. It's probably a little lower than I'd like as well. I'm looking probably more in that 25 to 500 again. But yeah, we were able to get them up and running again. And, we pulled out just under a 20% increase in that short span that we were there. So put a better leader in place. Again, not the right person in that seat, right? With them, put a better leader in place. And then, I check back with them every so often and yeah, they're doing just fine, actually.
Back to your corporate days, you were not only likable, but you also drove significant performance improvements, including a 2,800 basis point increase in SQO performance. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's sales qualified opportunities. So, after I left our company together, right, I went to work for a fintech company out of England, and they hired me because they were running only 74% to their target. I was hired in April that year, and by July we had picked up and made target. Right, we were over 100% mark, as that you just mentioned.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. The first thing I looked at is really what were we doing, right, to improve those marks. They had a lot of things in place nicely. The one thing they didn't have in place was any coaching, right? So if I remember correctly, because it's been a couple of years now, but we had about 6 coaching sessions with reps, and we had 60 reps. Mm-hmm. That's not, so 1 out of every 10 got 1 coaching during the month, right? So that was really the first piece I looked at and we cashed in on, right? Those 6 coachings in April became close to 400 by July, and those reps were a lot better. I was surprised. I wasn't anticipating hitting it quite as soon, but that was great. But yeah, it's just a matter of, and again, for those that maybe don't know sales qualified opportunities, it's, that's a business dev or development team that basically calls on clients. Mm-hmm. And we set up meetings for our account executives, right? And so we need to make sure that back then we were using BANT qualified, right? So we needed a budget, we needed authority and a need and a timeline, right? And yeah, we just weren't pulling enough of them at the time. And once that happened, our AE team was filling up because their goal was to continue a 20 to 25% increase every single year as well. It didn't matter how good the year before was, right? It was still on an extra 20 to 25%. And they were able to do that as well. So it was a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. So that's basically looking at how leads turn into actual revenue for the company, right? You take a look at, you assess how the lead process works and push them to sales and kind of maximize the revenue. Yes. That's what revenue operations means.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's part of it. Yes, it can take on many factors, but yeah, that is one step of it for sure, right? Yeah. And the way we knew those leads were better as well. Not only did we give them more, but our AE team, our account executive team, was actually accepting more because they don't have to accept those leads. They can say, "Hey, Brian, you know what? This person doesn't have X, Y, and Z." But we went from a 73% approval to 84% when I left. So they were taking on another 10 percentage points higher of those leads, and that helped keep us in that 22 to 25% increase for sales on their side too. So it's great.
I know there's always a dance between the marketing and the sales team about those leads.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, it's funny. My next question is about, again, management skills. I know you're not going to have too much of a difficulty in that area, but when you come in as a fractional executive, I know that there are going to be some unique challenges in terms of team alignment. So how do you establish trust and drive change management effectively in a short time frame?
So after the founder has signed the contract?
Right.
Okay. Because that's where it starts right there. Before they do. But after you sign it, we'll get together with the founder and we will have a meeting with his or her leadership team, right? So it's very clear what the roles are, right? And look, and I explain to all of them all the time too, right? I'm not there to replace you. I am moving on, okay? I'm not here forever, right? I'm just here to help. I'm here to listen. And I'm here to do whatever I can do to help Mr. and Mrs. Founder grow their business. And that's really it. Once we establish the expectations, get the niceties out of the way, that we can get down to business, right? And I do explain to some of them that I will be maybe more direct than the founder has been, right? Because that's part of the reason why they might be in the position they're in. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we just get aligned and we roll up our sleeves and we start to get into work. A good example, that fintech company, everybody I managed earned $85,000 to $120,000, right? They're very intelligent individuals. You need to be the individual that can take those with very strong egos and personalities, get them to buy in, right? Once you get them to buy in, everybody else buys in because they are the leaders of that realm, so to speak, right? And I always equate it to, I'm a big Yankee fan. So, Joe Torre had, back when he was managing in the late 90s, early 2000s, he had Jeter, right? Jeter was a great leader. People bought into him, kept his nose to the grind and did the work. And he leads by example. And I like to lead by example as well. Once you do that, I really feel that most of those folks in those S&Bs will follow and appreciate it.
Brian, you have a global experience in what you do. Mm-hmm. I remember you've led operations in the US, but also in Brazil, Canada, and the Philippines. Mm-hmm. And I would like to know, how does that global experience influence your approach today with clients?
It gives me more resources is what it does, first and foremost, right? Mm-hmm. There's been instances where, in fact, I'm in the process right now of possibly helping a prospect out that is looking for some SDRs, ISRs, right? They have different budgets, but I've reached out to folks in the Philippines, I've reached out to folks in Mexico, and I've reached out to folks in the US. So it gives me a lot of different resources in that avenue.
I can imagine, no matter the team or location, there are going to be some similar patterns, right?
Always. Yes. The languages are a little different, right? We were lucky enough, well, the Philippines, they speak probably better English than most of us here in the US. But, as far as Brazil, Mexico, there's a lot of English speakers in those countries. Like you mentioned, the business is very much alike, right? It's just navigating through legalities, governments. Of course, if you have to find real estate, there's those issues, right? Some of the languages in the legal documents is a little different. Mm-hmm. But overall, very similar.
I know that onboarding is one of those topics for a business that's necessary, but also can be very painful. You hired someone and you want them to start performing tomorrow, if not today. So onboarding is important, but at the same time, I know people can't be patient enough. So I know that one of your notable achievements is reducing ramp time by 20% through redesigning the onboarding process. Why is onboarding such a critical lever from your perspective, especially during periods of transition?
I'm glad you brought up onboarding because it is, besides the hiring, the most critical piece, right? This is where you basically get those employees to do what exactly you want done. And you need to make sure that there's a lot of expectations put in play and that they have a pure understanding. A lot of folks in the SMB world, their idea of training is, here's a small pamphlet we've put together, right? And here is your book of business, and start with the ones at the bottom first because they're not as likely to buy, and therefore just kind of train yourself to get through the script. That's not training, right? You and I both know that, right? So it's critical. And in this particular instance with that 20%, this was a company that was hiring individually instead of in some cohort sessions, right? So instead of hiring, which was eating up time with the managers because they were the trainers. So, and they had a training department. So all we did really was said, hey, look, human capital or human resources, can't remember which group it was back then, but human resources, instead of hiring one today and one 2 weeks from today, and put 5 together, give it to this training person. They're going to go through this curriculum, right? And part of it was sales. And I always like doing the sales piece first because it weeds out maybe some of the folks that aren't necessarily sales folks, right? And then when you have 4 left, if you don't have all 5, then you can get into the operations piece and some of the other stuff, right? And then at the end of that, maybe a short quiz like we did on the Google days, and also some role play, right? And that usually covers 2 weeks, right? And those folks came out a lot better. Our managers weren't tied down trying to train, which they weren't doing very well anyway, right? And so that was really an easy win. And
Is there like a checklist you have mentally to qualify a step in onboarding as necessary or not necessary? Like, do you always tie it to ROI?
Yeah, you have to actually assign it that way, right? I mean, let's go back to the fintech days, right? The goal there was to have 12 SQOs per rep. And, and that should be done by, in our case back then, within 4 months, right? So you had part of that first month was obviously training. The second month was a ramp. The third month was a ramp. And the fourth month was, hey, you need to be at the 12, right? So yes, if that didn't happen, then our return on that person is obviously shrinking at that point, right? So it was critical. And it was critical because we had targets where that person needed to start hitting the 12, right, in that fourth month. So if that didn't happen, then that put us behind the 8 ball. And now I needed my better players to now go out and pull 14 or 15 or 16, right, in a month, which wasn't as easy there. So, yes.
It's all about revenue. It's all about profit and revenue. And I know that one of your superpowers is optimizing that revenue percentage, especially portfolio revenue. How does a business increase that portfolio revenue without adding additional headcount?
Sure. Yeah. It's efficiencies, right? It's really becoming more efficient at what you do. There have been a couple of places, like some call centers that, it's been about, hey, call X amount, right? Let's just call it 70. Make 70 calls and you'll get to wherever you need, right? That's not always the case, right? Some of those best players there made 40 calls to the right people because they did their due diligence, right? And they outsold the heck out of everybody that was doing as much as 85 calls, right? Because they were just kind of spinning their wheels. So again, it's efficiencies that really maximize those individuals and the revenue in your business. It's not always just, hey, throw more headcount at it, right?
Right. It's more about fixing the systems and process instead of hiring more people to solve the problem.
And with AI today, I mean, you can even become more efficient, right? Than we did, 4 or 5,
What would you
6 years
do?
ago.
Would you just copy and paste your strategy into AI and be like, make this more effective so I can increase my revenue? How does that work?
I have done that actually, just to see what it came out, right? It was pretty close. So I felt good that it was close. But and then you just make a couple tweaks and you get off and running. So that is definitely something one could do, right? But again, you still have to execute it.
You still have to execute it. And
Yes.
my question is, can AI replace a fractional executive like you with 25 plus years of experience?
Can it come up with strategies? It can come up with strategies, right? And fairness, right? But but it's not executing anything. It's like the consultant, right?
Right.
They can give you 10 things to accomplish, but if you don't know how to go about it or how to keep the team together while you're going about it, it's not going to be a great ending.
Right. It's like going to a gym and somebody hands you a workout list, but you don't have a coach to walk you through those movements and reps and show you how.
Yeah. Or motivate you or pick you up or whatever the case may be. So what happens is you either get tired of doing it, you injure yourself because you didn't do it properly, right? And then you're done. And then, So
that can take you out of the game for months.
It does take you out of the game for months, right?
Right.
You just, and part of being a fractional too is really, it's not just executing, but I love working with the leaders there, right? And it's getting them for their next role within that company as well, right? So that's one of the things I've always loved doing, right? There's a lot of folks that I've worked with and mentored that, directors, VPs, right? They're entrepreneurs. They're doing a lot of great stuff, right? So that part always makes me feel good too.
This question is for SMB owners, small and medium-sized business owners, navigating complexity and rapid growth. We all want that fast growth.
Sure.
What is one fractional mindset shift they can adopt immediately?
They can stop thinking that they have to hire somebody full time. I've worked with a lot of other corporate companies, right, where we've hired a VP of X or a, C level here. I can't tell you how many times they've lasted 4 months, 8 months, a year, right?
How much do they get paid typically?
You can pretty much take 250 plus, right? Annually.
So that's money thrown in garbage.
And a lot of times, yes, because not much got done during that time, right? Here's the thing with a fractional. Yes, people think because it's fractional, it's part-time. Our contracts here at Fractional Leadership Hub are basically 60 to 80 hours of work. So if you think of that, that is half the time. Here's what's going to happen during that half the time though. Because half the time in corporate, I was sitting in meetings that didn't matter, replying to emails that didn't matter, doing a lot of stuff that just didn't matter, right?
One of the reasons why I left corporate, by the way.
And it eats up half your day. So in essence, you're getting me for the time you should have me, right? Plus I'm not to pun on, but I'm fraction of the cost as well, right? So it's not even close. So that's really the fractional mind shift I wish they would look at, right? You're not just renting me. You are utilizing skills and that have happened over time, right? And growing your business again. Yeah. And that's really it. And when I leave, I'm going to leave you in a better spot with somebody that perhaps together, because I've done that a couple of times, together we'll designate as person that should be in that seat, right?
You're the fraction of the cost, but you're the multiplier of value. So I have a question for you from the marketing side.
Okay.
I see a lot of businesses blaming lead quality or ads when performance drops.
Yes.
I've had some clients in the past that I wanted to tell them some things about operations and other things about the way they handle leads and the sales process. But in your experience, because you have 25 plus years of experience in this, how often is the real issue actually happening deeper in the business, in sales or operations?
Yes. Boy, sales and marketing are just going to be like lions and hyenas, right? I mean, there's just they want to blame the other one all the time. But look, one of the things about the fintech company I did like was I wasn't positioned with one of those two groups as head of SDR, right? I was positioned with operations, so I got to play on the fence a little bit there. But to answer your question, depending on the company, I could select things that marketing wasn't doing. Even with that company, I could see things that marketing wasn't necessarily coming through with, and I could see things on the sales side that they weren't doing very well either, right? And of course, it's easy to look in the mirror because I knew we weren't doing some things, right? So, but here's the key to everything: put the three teams together in a room, right? Set your egos aside and start looking at facts. If they can do that and take their heart out of it, it gets fixed a lot sooner than it doesn't, right?
What usually happens is they meet like once every 2 months because
it's time to blame somebody.
Nothing is happening. The more frequently they communicate, the more likely that they're going to have to improve.
Yes.
On both ends, right?
Yep. That's so true. And one of the things I did at that fintech company was I slotted a meeting each week with the VP of sales and a separate meeting with the VP of marketing. Yeah. And then I could help maybe bridge those interactions with the other party, right? So they kind of understood what was happening and why it was happening, right?
Do you still
Because
do that with the fractional roles that you have?
oh yeah, no, if they have a robust marketing team or any type of marketing team that helps drive revenue, then yes, they have to be put together. Yeah.
What's one thing you don't miss about corporate life that's better now?
I had a lot of good corporate jobs. If anything, maybe and I think I mentioned this earlier too, you get me for basically 68 hours a month. I didn't like the 68 hours of my corporate jobs that just didn't do anything to grow the business, right? Or I was just in there as another set of ears, right? I mean, if they were going to put my plans together then great, sure. But, a lot of times I was just there to represent a certain part of the company. That I can do without, right? I'd rather help the SMB because they know what they want and they're willing to change. And I'm just there to help them get there.
I always tell my friends as a Google rep, I remember hitting my performance targets this one month. And I don't know if you remember, they moved me to this nice desk. That was like the it desk with the Tempe Town Lake view.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it felt very luxurious and I felt like really great in that elevator, that top floor, that
Sure.
Town Lake view. But
It's a beautiful building. Yeah.
it was a beautiful building, but this is
Yeah.
better. This is better.
Yeah. No, I understand that completely. But yeah, they gave you the corner office with the view, so to speak.
What would be your advice to someone who is trying to be an entrepreneur?
Make sure it's something you're passionate about. I do see some founders that have opened businesses that maybe it was somebody else's idea, right? It was somebody else's, hey, you might be good at this or you could be good at this, but they didn't have the passion. And, your passion is marketing, hence your business is in marketing, right? My passion is operations and leadership and sales. So therefore, that's what I do. But I find a lot of entrepreneurs, far too many, actually, why did you open this, right? And yeah, that's first and foremost, right? And then just put together a good business plan. That's the other piece, right? With an exit strategy, because you never know, right? So if you can put those two things and then bounce it off a couple of folks. Heck, I would even take a free call. I'm not going to charge anybody for that. I would talk to somebody for, if they have a business plan they want to run by someone, I'd be glad to do that.
Thank you so much, Brian. This was such a great conversation.
No, I appreciate it, Meg. It was fun. Yeah, I appreciate you asking me to join.